Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Opposition.
I like the way I do it better. What a hell, Speaker.
My deputy minister, he was a brilliant public servant of both, serving both political parties and serving Canadians in the Senate, and all of us mourn with his family at the tragic loss of this great Canadian public servant.
I would like to quote the Food Bank Association. Food insecurity in Canada, so the number of people living in households that find it hard to feed themselves because of a lack of money, has increased to reach unprecedented amounts. That is after 8 years of taxes and deficits from this Prime Minister. Why does the Prime Minister want to stop Canadians from having safe access to food, just to increase taxes on the backs of these very Canadians?
Let's see what kind of virtue signaling Trudeau does.
Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, quite the contrary. Over the years, we lifted 500,000 children out of poverty, measures that the Conservatives voted against. We helped people reach new economic goals, and we know that people are finding it hard now, and that is a reason for which we are delivering for Canadians $10 daycare, dental care for children, or increased checks for childcare benefits. And the Conservatives voted against every single time. We will continue to help families during these difficult times. We'll invest in them instead of cutting everything like the Conservatives are proposing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Goes telling Canadians they've never had it so good when after 8 years he's not worth the cost of food. According to the hunger count by the Food Banks Canada, I quote, the number of people living in households struggling to afford food due to a lack of money have increased to the highest level on record, end quote. A record-smashing 2 million visits to Canadian food banks in a month. And his plan is to quadruple the carbon tax on the farmers and the truckers who bring us our food. How many Canadians have to go hungry or homeless before he axes this terrible tax?
That's a W for Pierre.
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
No Canadians struggling with the costs of food and groceries and housing. That's why we continue to step up to support them with measures like a $10 a day childcare, dental care for children, and child benefit checks. All measures that the Conservative Party has stood against, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to help Canadians. We'll continue our work to lift hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty, to lift over 1 million Canadians out of poverty. But there's much more to do. We will keep doing it instead of giving in to the Conservatives' demands for more cuts, for cuts to services for Canadians, to cuts to supports that people rely on.
Actually, Canadians are making cuts to their food. They're cutting back on their standard of living after 8 years of this Prime Minister who's not worth the cost. Back to that nightmarish report from Food Banks Canada, one Nova Scotian reported to researchers, quote, seniors are having trouble with home heating and many times have to choose between food and heating. And with heating bills coming up again soon and a cold winter expected, Nova Scotians will have to pay his carbon tax, which he plans to quadruple. How many Nova Scotia seniors will have to go homeless or hungry in order to pay his massive carbon tax hike?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member actually cared about seniors, he wouldn't have been part of the government that raised the retirement age, driving seniors further into poverty. We brought it back to 65. We continued to step up with supports for seniors, and we're going to continue to stand.
I think the true retirement age is like 75.
Colleagues are attacking the CPP.
Life is so expensive.
Finally realized that perhaps the CPP is a good thing, has come out in defense of it after decades, Mr. Speaker, of attacking seniors and their pensions, of attacking the CPP. We're going to continue unequivocally to stand to support seniors right across the country, unlike the Leader of the Opposition.
Not only have we always defended the CPP, the number of seniors requiring food banks was drastically lower when we were in government. Now, let me take a quote a British Columbian who reported to the Food Banks Canada report the following: "The cost of housing is indescribable. Many of our users are paying 50% of their annual income in rent to provide for accommodations if they can find them," end quote. This is the housing hell that this Prime Minister and the NDP have caused after 8 years. Will he realize that we don't need more photo ops, we don't need more bureaucracy, we need more homes?
Whoa!
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition has put forward no plan for housing, he lacks credibility on this issue. We are taking bold action to get more affordable homes built. Indeed, just today, the Minister of Housing is in British Columbia, is in Kelowna for our most recent Housing Accelerator announcement, which will streamline building permits
Sean
for
Fraser.
high-density housing near public transit, spurring the construction of up to 20,000 new housing units over the next decade in Kelowna. We're also working with Kelowna to make city-owned lands available for housing in partnership with nonprofits, and we look forward to sign more agreements right across the country, delivering for Canadians on housing.
It's like a parallel universe every time the NDP leader stands up and attacks the very government he's a part of and laments
Yeah,
miserable
there you go, Pierre.
for Canadians after 2 years of him being part of voting for quadrupling the carbon tax, driving up inflationary deficits, and of course driving 2 million people to the food banks in a single month. He blames greed for all this hunger. He's right. It is the greed of Liberal and NDP politicians
coalition.
who keep taking more and more from Canadians. Will they reverse these disastrous policies?
Man, I love how he calls it out like that.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
All of us in this House see how Canadians are struggling. We just have different responses to it. The Conservative Party is proposing cuts to government services, cuts to investments that are going to support seniors, cuts to investments that are going to support families, whether it's dental care or child care. The Conservative Party thinks you can cut your way to prosperity when the reality is, Mr. Speaker, our investments in child care, in dental care, in supports for seniors, in supports for students have actually helped Canadians through some difficult times and will continue to be there for them into the coming years.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Being there for Canadians, he's taking money out of their pockets. And if you don't believe me, listen to the Governor of the Bank of Canada, who said, and I quote, "Today, government spending will be adding to demand more than supply is growing. And in an environment where we are trying to moderate spending and get inflation down, that is not helpful." That adds to the voices of the former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley, who accused this Prime Minister of pressing on the inflationary gas pedal. Will the Prime Minister tell us, does he agree with the bank governor that his government spending is not helpful on inflation?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know we need support and we need more supply on the housing crisis, and that's why we are there investing with municipalities to deliver more housing. In Brampton, our housing agreement will spur the construction of more than 24,000 homes over the next decade. That's an investment that the Leader of the Opposition would cut. In other cities like Richmond Hill, Moncton, and Ajax just this week are passing more ambitious housing plans at their local councils in response to the federal housing accelerator. While the Leader of the Opposition would rip up these agreements, we're focused on building solutions that'll work for communities right across the country.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The question wasn't about his housing photo ops. The question was about the rate of inflation and its link to government spending. And I quote the Governor of the Bank of Canada on this point today, and I quote, "Government spending will be adding to demand more than supply is growing. And in an environment where we are trying to moderate spending and get inflation down, that is not helpful." He's now clearly saying that government spending is driving up inflation. So very simple question. Does the Prime Minister agree with the bank governor that deficits are driving inflation? Yes or no?
It's Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. I guarantee.
Honorable Premier Ministre.
Except, Mr. Speaker, that inflation is steadily coming down, Mr. Speaker, even as we continue to sign agreements with communities across the country. And by the way, if the opposition leader cared so much about getting more homes built, he would support our Affordable Housing and Groceries Act. This legislation will remove the GST on the construction of rental homes, which housing advocates and developers have described as a game changer. That's the relief that Canadians need. So let's keep moving these important measures forward, and let's keep getting Canadians the housing relief they need instead of political attacks and cuts from the Conservatives.
I'd like to remind all members, please, to wait your turn to take the microphone. I know that some members are very enthusiastic, but there are other members who are certainly going to be asking their questions. The honourable member, the honourable leader of the opposition.
He's very determined to avoid discussing the growing evidence of the link between his deficits and the inflation Canadians pay. So let's review what the bank governor said today. He said, 1, inflation risks are rising. 2, that inflation won't get back to target until the year 2025, 2 years out. And 3, the bank is now leaving its door open to further rate hikes, probably spurred on by the deficits of this government. With mortgage payments up 150%, for God's sakes, won't he get rid of these inflationary deficits so that Canadians can keep their homes?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, what the Leader of the Opposition is proposing is to cut spending and supports for Canadians in the hopes that Canadians will somehow do better that way. We disagree. What Canadians need is greater investment in supply of housing, for example. That's why through our agreements, we're unlocking new homes and opportunities for growth in the city of Hamilton by spurring the construction of thousands of homes over the next decade, like we are across the country. The Mayor of Hamilton actually said our housing agreement was absolutely a big deal, and I couldn't agree more. When we work together with a strong and ambitious plan, we can get more homes built faster. While the Leader of the Opposition's plan would see these agreements ripped up and stalled, we will keep going forward to help Canadians.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
You know one word he never used in that big, rambling, read-off answer? Done. Because none of those houses are done. They're all promises. But he's been promising to build affordable homes for 8 years. Since he first made that promise, housing costs have doubled, and none of the promises have come to fruition. Yes, other levels of government have politicians that are thrilled to have more money to bloat their bureaucracies. When will he realize that we don't make housing affordable by building bureaucracy? We have to build homes.
That is true.
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, we are working hand in hand with municipalities across this country, whether it be Kelowna or Hamilton or Ajax or now Halifax, where we're continuing to move forward with investments that are going to respond to people. And I have to say, I was in Brampton just last week, Mr. Speaker, and as we were making another announcement about new homes coming up, we were standing on the site of a building that we announced 2 years ago that was opening its doors to new residents today. Mr. Speaker, this is what we are doing. After that member was housing minister who got nothing done, we're there to invest in Canadians and build a stronger future.
Wow. You don't see Trudeau get mad that often. Throwing a little tantrum. Drop a like on the stream, everybody. Now's the time.
Speaker, he has the best photo ops in the history of photo ops. We'll give him credit for that. He wants to know what I got done when I was housing minister. The average rent was $950. It's now over $2,000. When I was housing minister, the average mortgage payment was $1,400. It's now well over $3,500. When I was housing minister, the average needed down payment was $20,000, and you could own a home on average by 29. Now those numbers have skyrocketed. I deal in the world of results. He deals in the world of photo ops. I know which ones Canadians prefer.
Whoa! There you go. tensions are pretty high in the House today.
Mr. Speaker, while he continues to insult and slag cities and municipalities across this country, we're going to continue to work with them, like we're working with the City of Halifax to build more homes so locals can thrive in their community. Recently, we announced an agreement with Halifax to fast-track 2,600 permitted units over the next 3 years, spurring the construction of thousands of homes over the next decade. But he wants to talk about what happened when he was housing minister. When he was housing minister, he announced $300 million and got 99 homes built, Mr. Speaker. That's his record as housing minister. We're building homes right across
He's going to pop a blood vessel.
Real, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, everybody. This is pretty intense.
Again, with all of his expensive promises that have not completed a single home. He mentions that I spent only $300 million on housing, but he got the number of houses built wrong. It was actually 200,000 homes that were built.
Oh, wow, Pierre.
But we know that numbers aren't his strength, Mr. Speaker. This is the guy who thinks budgets balance themselves, who doesn't think about monetary policy, who doubled the debt, doubled housing costs, doubled the rent. What else is going to double before this Prime Minister realizes that he's just not worth the cost?
Our debt, maybe.
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The member opposite knows full well he can look in the history records, a $300 million program which delivered 99 homes. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to work hand in hand with municipalities, with community leaders, with nonprofits across the country to move forward on building more homes, on responding to the supply challenges. That's why, for example, we're removing GST from new apartment buildings. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the members opposite refuse to allow that bill to move forward, are continuing to block it, and they don't want to vote for it either, Mr. Speaker. We're going to be there to support Canadians every step of the way.
Let's go.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This Prime Minister is neither worth the cost nor the corruption. We know that he illegally interfered to block the criminal prosecution of a multinational liberal-linked corporation that had stolen from Africa's poorest people. But now we know that he was involved in blocking the RCMP from investing the criminality of his conduct. He held back cabinet documents. So we invited the top Mountie to testify on this cover-up, and he and his co-conspirators and the NDP silenced the RCMP commissioner and prevented him from testifying. Will the Prime Minister stop the cover-up and let the Mounties testify?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's what all of Canada wants and deserves to see. It's our democratic right.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite well knows that both the RCMP and CBSA's Professional Integrity Division are investigated. The CBSA has also launched an internal audit to look into contracting at the agency and has increased oversight processes when it comes to contracting.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the question was about the SNC-Lavalin criminal investigation, not the ArriveCAN app criminal investigation. I can understand there's so many criminal investigations. I'm confused sometimes. He sure knows enough about them to block from any scrutiny. He deprived the police of cabinet documents that may have led to criminal charges against him, and now he's depriving a parliamentary committee from investigating it. The question is, yes or no, will he let the commissioner of the RCMP testify about his blockage of cabinet documents in the criminal investigation of the SNC-Lavalin scandal?
Yeah. There's no way he just got his criminal investigations mixed up.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Only in Canada.
The leader is bringing up matters that were duly settled 4 years ago. It's obvious that they have no vision for the future of this country, no plan to move Canada forward, and nothing to offer Canadians except cuts, austerity, and partisan attacks.
Chef de l'opposition.
Well, one thing we will cut is the ArriveCAN app. The matter is also under criminal investigation. It was an app we didn't need, didn't work, and was about 500 times more expensive than it should have been. Yes. We now know that one of the contractors that got paid submitted detailed documentation on a company that didn't even exist. We know the Prime Minister criminal investigations into his SNC-Lavalin scandal. Will he agree, yes or no, to cooperate with the police in the ArriveCan criminal investigation?
Wow. Drop some apples in the chat, everybody.
Très honorable Premier Ministre.
That's a Pierre W.
Said to the opposition leader that when it comes to contracting, investigations are ongoing and processes have been updated. But he doesn't much care about facts or process, just his hidden agenda driven by ideology. An ideology rooted in denying that the government had to act fast in a once-in-a-century moment to keep Canadians safe. He doesn't want to talk about the pandemic. He doesn't want to talk about his behavior during the pandemic and following it. He will continue to try and distract, deflect, based on his ideology, based on the members of his team. It's very telling that the Conservative Party would choose not to prioritize Canadian safety.
Wow, talk about deflection.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
He accuses me of distracting. The question was about the criminal investigation into the ArriveCan app. And what does he do? He tries once again to divide Canadians in order to distract from the costs and corruption that he has imposed upon them. So I asked a very simple question. We now know that a program he created is under criminal investigation. Will he, yes or no, cooperate with the police?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, both the RCMP and CBSA's Professional Integrity Division are investigating, and the CBSA has also launched an internal audit to look into contracting at the agency. But once again, Mr. Speaker,
Like a broken record.
the leader of the opposition talks about dividing Canadians. He doesn't actually want to accept that over 80% of Canadians chose to get vaccinated during the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. And he continues to play divisive games. He continues to play divisive games to try and divide Canadians on a matter core to public health and public safety. We have always stood up for the safety of Canadians while he chooses to wear a tinfoil hat.
Whoa! Holy crap, they're out for blood, man.
Colleagues, I do encourage you once again to take note of my declaration from last week, encouraging members to make statements, to avoid statements which are qui peut déranger les procédures.
That could disrupt the proceedings of the House of Commons.
The Wall Street Journal revealed today that mere weeks before Hamas terrorists unleashed the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, they went to Iran to take training and direction from the terrorist group, the IRGC. Strangely, given that this group is probably the most dangerous terrorist outfit on earth, it is perfectly legal to raise money for it, to organize and recruit for it right here in Canada. Will the Prime Minister ban the IRGC today?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
During the previous Conservative government's attacks and rhetoric against Iran, including the closing of the embassy, they never moved forward on banning the IRGC and declaring it a terrorist organization. We know there is a rigorous process to do that, and we are pursuing and looking at all options around that. What we did do, Mr. Speaker, is use never before used or rarely before used measures in the immigration department that were used in case of war crimes in Rwanda and elsewhere to ban for life senior members of the IRGC from ever being able to come and find solace in Canada. That is a strong measure, and we're always open to doing more.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The same people he claims are banned are present in Canada today. They are terrorizing Persian Canadians. Many Jews feel that their safety is at risk. knowing that there are people with links to the world's most dangerous and anti-Semitic terrorist organization legally operating on the ground here in Canada. The Prime Minister has the legal authority embedded in the law today with a stroke of a pen to criminalize the IRGC. Will he do it? Yes or no?
Come on, yeah.
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
He has to do it or he's screwed.
Correcting the honourable leader of the opposition on the facts. We'll be here all day. The fact of the matter is the listing of an organization as a terrorist organization is actually a meticulous process led by intelligence and security agencies and carefully calibrated to do no harm to Canadians or Canadian military members serving overseas. We will continue to take all measures to hold the murderous regime in Iran to account. We will continue to stand with the community. We will stand against anyone who's attempting to harm or intimidate Canadians on Canadian soil. And we are always open to doing more, Mr. Speaker. That is what we are continuing to work on.
Hear, hear.
Avant que je passe au chef de l'opposition.
Before I move on to the Leader of the Opposition, I wish to remind the member for South Shore St. Margaret's to leave the floor to those who have the floor during question period.
Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Minister has had plenty of time to go through that meticulous process. Under the anti-terror law adapted in the aftermath of 9/11, the Public Safety Minister, which reports to the Prime Minister, has the ability to put groups on the list. There are dozens that have already been added, but the most dangerous terrorist group of all, the IRGC, can still legally fundraise, coordinate, organize, and propagate its message here on Canadian soil at great risk to Canadian Jews and Persians. Will the Prime Minister put his intransigence and stubbornness aside and protect Canadians for once and ban the IRGC?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, we have taken and will continue to take significant actions to hold the murderous regime in Tehran to account. We continue to recognize them as supporters of terrorism around the world. We continue to take more tools in terms of doing that, and all options, as always, are on the table. We need to make sure we're doing it in a way that protects Canadians, including Canadians of Iranian descent, but also military members in our CAF serving around the world. We will continue to do the right things to keep all Canadians safe and hold the Iranian regime to account.
Hear, hear.
Speaker, the Americans banned the IRGC in 2019. They reaffirmed, President Biden reaffirmed that decision just last year. The Liberal caucus even voted in this House in favor of banning the IRGC, but the Prime Minister blocked that from happening. He has the legal authority to do it. This is the world's most dangerous terrorist group. They helped orchestrate the hideous attacks on the people of Israel just weeks ago. Will he finally do the right thing and ban the IRGC? Yes or no?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition should know, the Americans have a very different regime from us when it comes to banning various organizations. But we continue to have all options on the table. As we've said, we continue to do everything necessary to hold this murderous Iranian regime to account, and we will continue to move forward in measures to do just that.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Actually, the regime is really not that different when it comes to listing. We both have the power of the executive branch to identify terrorist groups and put them on a list of banned entities, banning them from raising money, recruiting, coordinating, and arranging attacks on other people around the world. That power exists in Canada. And in fact, because the Prime Minister has not been willing to exercise that power using his executive authority, Conservatives have a helpful private members bill that would do it for him. Will he adopt the Conservative private members bill to ban the IRGC? Yes or no?
He's going to have to, man. I don't know why he's not.
Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do
corrupt.
everything we can to hold the Iranian regime accountable for its actions. Our actions have included having sanctioned hundreds, over 368 in fact, of Iranian individuals and entities, including the IRGC Quds Force. And we're listing the regime under the most powerful provision of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. We're, of course, working on a way to recognize the regime to continue to be what it is, which is spreading a regime that spreads terror. And we're working to find a way that doesn't unfairly affect those who may have an association with the IRGC through no choice of their own or puts at risk members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there are plenty of ways to protect people who are unintentionally forced to participate in terrorist groups. That's what we do with all the listed banned terrorist entities that are already on the list. So those tools already exist. The Prime Minister has had 8 years. 8 years. He is not worth the cost. He is not worth the risk to our safety. Will he adopt the common sense conservative proposal to criminalize the IRGC terrorist group today?
Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, no one in this House disagrees that the Iranian regime is murderous, is a sponsor of terror, is bloodthirsty against people around the world and indeed against its own citizens. I remember well having held in my arms families of the victims of PS 752, brokenhearted because of what this murderous regime is capable of doing against its own citizens, let alone against citizens around the world. That is why we've continued to pursue every available means to hold the Iranian regime to account, to support people fighting for freedom in their country, to support Iranian Canadians, and we will continue to do just that.